I worked for 41 years. Not the kind of work that gets written up in newspapers or earns you a plaque on a wall somewhere. The kind of work that starts before sunrise and ends after dark. The kind that leaves calluses on your hands and a quiet satisfaction in your chest when you finally sit down at the end of the day. I ran a plumbing supply business in Tauranga, nothing glamorous. Nothing that would make the evening news, but it was mine. Every fitting, every length of copper pipe, every invoice and delivery schedule, I knew it all. My name was on the door, Neville Marsh, and for 4 decades that was enough. My wife, Carol, passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer. We had 34 years together, and I will not pretend that losing her did not take something fundamental out of me. The house got quieter in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Our son, Marcus, was 32 when she died. He flew in from Wellington, stayed for 2 weeks, helped me sort through her things. I was grateful for that. I told him so. After Carol, I sold the business, kept the house in Tauranga, a brick place up on Matheson Road, with a view of the harbor if you stood on the deck and craned your neck just right. I had enough to live well. More than enough, if I am being honest. The accountant told me I was in good shape. I told him that was nice to hear, and then I went home and sat on the deck by myself and watched the water change color as the sun went down. Marcus had always wanted to run a restaurant. Even as a teenager, he would cook on weekends. Something elaborate that took all afternoon and left the kitchen looking like a small disaster. Carol used to say he had her father's hands in the kitchen. I do not know whether that was true. I just knew that when Marcus talked about food, his whole face changed. He became someone who believed completely in what he was saying. He moved to Queenstown in his late 20s. Met a woman named Priya. There she had grown up in Christchurch, Indian heritage on her father's side, and she was sharp, organized, the sort of person who remembered details and followed through on things. I liked her when I met her. She seemed good for Marcus. They married in 2017, a small ceremony near Arrowtown. Autumn colors everywhere. The kind of day you keep somewhere safe in your memory. In early 2019, Marcus rang me on a Sunday afternoon. He had found a property in Queenstown, a converted stone building near the lake, the kind of thing that had character baked into the walls. He wanted to open a restaurant. Not a cafe, not a bistro, a proper restaurant, the kind with a genuine kitchen and a wine list and bookings taken 2 weeks in advance. He had a name picked out already, Ridgeline. He talked for nearly an hour. The concept, the fit-out, the chef he had already spoken to, the location, the foot traffic data he had looked into. He had done real work on it. I could hear Carol in the back of my mind saying that this was what he was supposed to do, that some people are aimed at one particular thing their whole lives without knowing it, and when they finally find it, you either help or you stand aside. I asked how much he needed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, $420,000. I want to tell you I thought carefully about it. I want to say I asked the right questions, consulted the accountant, drew up some kind of agreement. But the truth is, I said yes within 2 days. He was my son. The business had been his inheritance, in some sense anyway. Carol would have written the check herself without blinking. So I transferred the money in 2 stages, $210,000 in March. The remainder in June, when the fit-out costs came through higher than expected. I did not ask for paperwork. I did not ask for a percentage of the business. I asked Marcus to keep me updated, and he said he would, and I believed him, because he was my son, and I had no framework yet for not believing him. The updates came regularly at first. Photos of the stone walls being restored, the kitchen taking shape, the bar area. Marcus would ring on Sunday evenings and walk me through what had happened that week. Priya had taken on the front-of-house design, and from the photos it looked beautiful, warm lighting, native timber detailing, the kind of space that made you want to sit down and stay a while. Then the updates became less frequent. I told myself this was normal. The closer you get to opening, the busier you become. I had run a business. I understood that the final stretch is consuming in a way that the earlier stages are not. I sent a few messages asking how things were going. Marcus would reply briefly, "Good. Nearly there. Few things to sort," and I took that at face value. In the months that followed, I noticed I was the one initiating contact. Marcus would reply, but he rarely rang me first anymore. The Sunday evening calls had stopped altogether. I put it down to stress. I told myself that once Ridgeline was open and running, things would settle. He would ring more. We would go back to normal. I had not been to Queenstown since the wedding. I think about that now. $420,000, and I had not once driven down to see the building, to walk through the space, to stand in the kitchen and shake the chef's hand. I had reasons. The hip replacement in late 2019, then the border closures, then simply the inertia of a man on his own who has grown accustomed to the shape of his days. But reasons are not the same as explanations, and I have learned to be honest with myself about the difference. It was Marcus's birthday in September. I rang in the morning and got his voicemail. I left a message, wished him well, mentioned I had a gift set aside for him. He sent a text back that afternoon. "Thanks, Dad. Busy day. We'll call soon." He did not call that week. I rang again the following Sunday. Voicemail again. I rang the week after. He picked up, sounded distracted, said things were hectic at the restaurant, that the first few months had been a steep learning curve, that he was sorry he had not been in touch. I said I understood. I asked when would be a good time to visit, and he said, "Let me check with Priya, and I will get back to you." He did not get back to me. I started to feel something I did not have a name for at first. Not anger, not hurt, exactly. Something quieter and colder. Like standing in a room and realizing the furniture has been rearranged while you were away, and no one thought to mention it. I rang Priya in late October. She was polite, pleasant in the way that people are when they are managing a conversation carefully. She asked how I was keeping, how the hip was going, whether I was still doing the walks around the harbor. I answered all of it. Then I asked about the restaurant. She paused. It was brief, a second, perhaps two, but I had spent 4 decades in business reading the small silences in conversations, and I heard something in that one. She said the restaurant was going well. Really well, actually. The reviews had been strong, and maybe one, Joning Tin presented. I said I was glad to hear it. She said the location had turned out to be even better than they had hoped. I asked when the opening had been. I said I had not wanted to get in the way in those first busy weeks, but I was hoping to come down soon and see the place properly. There was a longer pause this time. She said, quietly, "The opening was in August. Neville. We had a small function. It was just close family and friends." I sat with that for a moment. August was 2 months earlier. I said, "Right." She said nothing. I said, "I see." I did not say anything else for a while. Neither did she. Then I said I hoped things continued to go well, and I said goodbye. And I put the phone down carefully, the way you put something down when you are afraid of what you might do if you are not deliberate about it. I did not sleep well that night. Or the following one. I am 67 years old. I grew up in a household where money was not discussed openly, where you did not name what things cost or what they meant. My father's generation believed that providing was the expression of love, that the act itself said everything that needed to be said. I had given my son $420,000, and I had believed, without ever examining the belief, that this made me present in what he was building, that my money in the walls meant I was in the room. I was not in the room. I had not been invited to be in the room. The following week, Marcus rang. He was cheerful. A little too cheerful, in the way people are when they have been briefed on a difficult conversation and have decided to handle it by moving quickly past it. He said he had been meaning to ring, that things had been hectic, that Priya mentioned I had called. He said I should definitely come down, that I would love the restaurant, that the chef was doing extraordinary things with the menu. I let him talk. I have found, in my 60s, that you learn a great deal by letting people talk themselves toward the thing they are trying to avoid saying. Eventually, he said, there is one thing, one of the equipment invoices from the fit-out. There was a shortfall from what we had budgeted, about $38,000. The accountant flagged it. I was wondering if you would be able to help bridge that gap. I was quiet for a moment. I said, Marcus, I was not at the opening. He said he knew that they had kept it small. I said, I put $420,000 into those walls, and I was not considered close family. He did not say anything. I said, I have been ringing you for months. You have not returned half my calls. You did not mention to me, in any of our conversations, that the restaurant had opened. I found out from Priya. When I asked directly, he started to say something about how busy it had been, about the pressure of those first weeks, about how he had meant to ring. I said, I would like to come to Queenstown, not to discuss the invoice. I would like to see you, and I would like to see what my money built, and I think we need to have a real conversation, not about money, about what has happened to us. He agreed, though I heard something careful in the agreement. Something that told me he had expected a different kind of conversation and was not entirely sure what to do with this one. I drove to Queenstown on a Wednesday in November, 6 hours from Tauranga, stopping once near Twizel for petrol and a pie from a bakery that had been there since the 80s. The drive gave me time to think, which I needed. I had spent the previous fortnight being honest with myself about things I had been avoiding. I had given my son money without conditions because I did not want to be the kind of father who attached strings. But in avoiding that, I had also avoided being the kind of father who is present. I had told myself I was respecting his independence, his process. What I had actually done was fund a dream and then step back so completely that I had made it easy for him to forget I was part of it. That was not entirely his failure. It was also mine, but it was also not entirely mine. Ridgeline was on a side street 1 block from the lake. Stone facade, a brass nameplate, a chalkboard out front with the evening menu. Even from outside, you could see that it was the real thing, the kind of restaurant that had been thought about carefully, that had the weight of genuine intention behind it. I stood on the footpath for a while and looked at it. My $420,000 were in every stone of that wall. I went inside. The lunchtime service had finished. A young woman at the front desk told me Marcus was in the office. I said I knew the way, and I walked through the dining room, warm timber, native flax prints on the walls, the kitchen visible through a pass-through window, and found him at his desk with a spreadsheet open on his laptop. He looked up. There was a moment brief, unguarded, where I saw something cross his face that I had not seen in some time. Something young, something that still needed me in a way neither of us had admitted. He stood up and hugged me. It was not a brief hug. I sat down across from his desk and I looked at my son, 40 years old now, a few gray threads in his hair, and I said, I need you to tell me what happened. Not the logistics, not the timeline. I need you to tell me why your father was not at the opening of the restaurant he made possible. It took him a long time to answer. What came out, over the next hour and a half, was not one thing, but several things accumulated. Priya had been the one to manage the guest list for the opening, and she had wanted to keep it small, genuinely small. 15 people, mostly friends their own age, people who had been part of the Queenstown years. She had not wanted it to feel like a formal event. Marcus had told himself he would ring me separately, do something special, bring me down for a private dinner before the full opening. He had meant to. The weeks had gone by. The private dinner had not happened. And then the momentum of the thing carried them forward, and I had become, without anyone deciding it deliberately, someone on the outside of what they were building. I asked whether he had told Priya about the 420,000. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said she knew he had borrowed money from me, but not the full amount. I said, "Marcus, I did not lend you money. I gave you money. There was never a discussion of repayment." He looked at the desk. I said, "I am not here about the money. I am here because I am your father, and I am 67 years old, and I have one son, and somewhere in the last 2 years, we have ended up as people who do not speak properly to each other. That is what I came about." Priya joined us that afternoon. The conversation was not easy. There were things said that required saying. There were silences that had to be sat in. Priya had not understood the full weight of what I had contributed. And once she did, I watched something shift in her, not guilt. Exactly, but a recalibration. A recognition that the story she had been telling herself about a small family loan was not the complete story. I told them both that I did not want to be a burden, and I did not want to be a boarder, but I did want to be a father. I wanted Sunday calls. I wanted to hear about the difficult weeks and the good ones. I wanted to come to Queenstown twice a year and sit at a table in that dining room and watch what my son had built, to do the thing it was built to do. Marcus said yes. He said it simply, without qualification. About the 38,000, I told them I would think about it. I was not being cruel. I was being honest. I had learned, perhaps later than I should have, that love without accountability is not generosity. It is avoidance wearing the costume of generosity. If I simply wrote another check and we went back to the pattern we had been in, nothing would have changed except the number in my bank account. I drove back to Tauranga on the Friday. The harbor was doing something beautiful when I came over the Kaimai Range, the light at that particular angle in the late afternoon that makes the water look like hammered copper. I sat on the deck that evening with a cup of tea and let myself feel the full weight of the previous few days. I rang my accountant the following Monday. I told him I was thinking about formalizing my involvement in a family business, not as a controlling interest, not as a means of holding anything over anyone, but as a structure, something that documented what had been contributed and gave all parties a clear understanding of the relationship. He said that was very sensible. He said he wished more families thought this way before things became complicated. I told him they had already become complicated. And he said yes, they usually do. 3 weeks later, Marcus rang me on a Sunday evening. He talked for 40 minutes. He told me about a review in a Queenstown travel publication that had called Ridgeline one of the best new restaurants in the South Island. He told me about a problem they had with the cool room that had cost them 3 days of service and $600 in spoiled produce and had nearly broken both of them. He told me Priya's mother was visiting from Christchurch, and that the two of them had been cooking together on Monday mornings when the restaurant was closed, and that it had been unexpectedly healing. He told me he was sorry, not in a practiced way, in the way that takes time to arrive at, the way that is only possible once you have sat with something long enough to understand its full shape. I told him I knew. I told him that was enough, and I meant it. I am 67 years old, and I have learned some things the easy way and some things the hard way, and a few things I had to learn twice before they took hold. If you are going to put your money into someone's dream, even someone you love completely, especially someone you love completely, write it down, not because you do not trust them, but because documents protect relationships. A clear agreement at the beginning prevents the kind of slow drift that happened between my son and me. It keeps everyone honest. It keeps the love honest. Do not confuse funding something with being part of it. Presence is not the same as payment. I gave my son $420,000 and then stepped back and called it respect for his independence. What I should have done was stay engaged, visit the building, ask the difficult questions, make it clear that my involvement was not only financial. Money without relationship is just a transaction. I wanted it to be more than that. I should have said so clearly from the beginning. And if you find yourself on the outside of something you helped build, do not let silence become the permanent arrangement. I waited too long before I drove to Queenstown. I told myself I was giving them space. What I was actually doing was hoping the situation would resolve itself without requiring anything difficult of me. It does not work that way. The difficult conversation was the one that mattered. It was the only one that could actually change anything. Marcus rang last Sunday. The restaurant had its first fully booked weekend. He said the kitchen ran clean. The service was smooth. And at the end of the night, he stood in the empty dining room for a few minutes by himself. He said he wished I had been there. I told him I would be there in July. He said he would make sure there was a table by the window, the one that looks out toward the Remarkables. He said the light in the evenings at that time of year was something worth seeing. I told him I was counting on it.